So, Elise, we've just finished the scientific meeting for ICS 2020. It was all online, and that was a new thing. How did you find it all?
Well, we know each other really well, so working together online flowed fairly easily. I think the scientific meeting looks fantastic, and whereas online education has been an important bridge during this time of COVID, I am just thirsting for the deep exchange of ideas we achieve with organized panels and a room full of professionals throwing questions and comments up for discussion.
Yes, I don't think you can underestimate the added value of meeting together, and particularly the informal networking. And that's so much more difficult to achieve in any meeting. And I think, regardless, though, the scientific committee meeting, I remember when I was General Secretary talking about moving the scientific committee meeting to online only. We pulled it off, and it works really well, as you say. I must say that Jenny over in New Zealand having to get up at 1 o'clock in the morning to start was particularly dedicated to ICS, but it all went very exceedingly well. And Vincent too, of course, in Australia.
Yes,
but it just shows what you can achieve if you have to.
There were a few on either end of the spectrum, that's true.
Yeah. So what do you think are the highlights in the sections you looked at? You looked after videos, didn't you, particularly, and a few other bits?
I did, yes. There are some really nice videos on gender affirmation surgery, in particular, a placement of a penile implant in a female to male patient. Oh, so there was a few great videos. There was one placement of inflatable penile prosthesis following gender affirmation phalloplasty with radial forearm free flap. One on 4 neovagina techniques in the anatomical model. And one for our colorectal colleagues on rectal prolapse repair in males. Is robotic ventral mesh retropexy the right choice? Really nice spread of different types of videos.
Yeah, I must say, as a non-surgeon, I always find it quite difficult to understand what you guys get out of that. It's kind of surgical porn. But having scored some other videos, I thought that the production over the last couple of years has got so much better. Really slick, professional quality and well edited. So I can appreciate the skill and the surgical skill. I still don't get what you guys get out of it, though.
It's really educational before doing a case that you do a lot or that's new for you, to look at a video of how somebody else does it. You can't read enough about it or hear enough about it without actually seeing the video. And obviously it would be wonderful if we could be in each other's operating rooms, but that exchange is not realistic.
So well worth going to see then, and you get a lot out of that. And presumably if the experts are on hand, you can have a good discussion as well to get some of the finer points.
Absolutely. And even if you're not in a surgical field, watching the surgical videos of the cases your patients are having complications from or needing can be really educational to improve the depth of your care.
Yeah, and actually even I have been in the operating room assisting with some things, so I know exactly what goes on and what people go through. So that's really useful. Were there any other things that you think really should be pointed out to the potential audience?
Yeah, there's one state of the art lecture called Bugs, Brain, and the Gut Towards a Better Understanding of Pathology and Management of Neurogenic Bowel Dysfunction. And this year I did a lot of reading about the enteric nervous system. It's sort of part of the autonomic nervous system, but it's also got its own entity with direct communication with the brain. And I think that's going to be a really interesting piece. A lot of interesting workshops. So users' guides to practical interpretation of research, evidence for shared decision making. That's workshop 6. And then another patient-centered video, workshop 14, merging patient-centered care with evidence-based research. So I think those two are going to be a nice complement to each other.
That's interesting, and that reflects some of the abstracts where we saw a lot of things around social media, use of social media, web content on a lot of our subjects, and how people find the content is perhaps not well balanced, some evidence of commercial bias, but we certainly did see a lot more abstracts and thought about what is really, I guess, patient engagement than we have in the past.
True, it's true. There was also a nice variety of workshops. So workshop 10 is obstructive defecation syndrome, conservative and surgical treatment. So it's nice to merge those two in one workshop. So workshop 15, the role of ultrasound imaging and workup and management of mesh complications.
And certainly there's been a lot of discussion around indwelling catheters and the environmental impact of single-use disposable plastics. So maybe some thought about that kind of impact as well. I looked at some of the urodynamic stuff, and it was quite interesting. There's a nice abstract from University College on a nocturnal ambulatory urodynamics in the investigation of nocturia, where you can only pick up detrusor overactivity at night. And I remember having a few patients with exactly that problem, and they've done a series and reported on the increased rate of diagnosis there. And of course, then there's the usual hodgepodge of urodynamic attempts at trying to diagnose a variable, a biological phenomenon and pigeonhole it as usual, but all quite interesting investigations and well worth seeing, I think.
Remembering my first ICS meeting as a fellow, the things that were the most important to me that meeting were the ICS terminology and the basic urodynamics. And I was really pleased to see we have update on ICS terminology and basic urodynamics this year, because for our early career members, these can really unfold for the rest of their career if they really get it down early.
Yes, well, interesting. My first ICS was the hallmark of that was not only some of that understanding, but actually meeting the authors of the papers that I was reading to gain an understanding, and seeing that these people existed, and they were quite normal people. It was always a very friendly place, and it's good to see that in the last couple of years that we have really rekindled that collegiate sense at the ICS meeting, and that's partially what makes it such a great experience. That there is that feeling of collegiality and multi-professional respect.
I've always gotten as much out of the people I bumped into and had a conversation with just by chance as I have the intentional scientific content. And the first time I ended up on the education committee was through interaction with one of our colleagues, Tony Stone, when I was a fellow at the meeting. Yeah. So, Adrian, did you have any particular abstracts that you found interesting this year?
Yes, I was in charge of coordinating the urogynecology group, and I think we had some fascinating abstracts in that category. We had some huge national registry work looking at single incision mesh and the complications thereof. We had a number of things around prolapse and recovery, particularly in older women versus younger women, showing that not surprisingly, older women take longer to recover and have more complications. And the authors really suggesting we should be more cautious when we're doing radical things to older women. And there were quite a few abstracts looking at social media and the misinformation that seems to be prevalent both in Facebook, YouTube, and Pinterest content. So I think there's a lot of work we could usefully do there as a learned society, trying to get rid of some of that disinformation.
Thank you.